video, we're going to go over the Oker Hills Middle School grade scale and your options, what you can and cannot do to configure your grade book to work with our grade scale in many different ways. So I want to get started by looking at our current grade scale. Now, due to COVID and other things, we're not looking at changing or adjusting or modifying the grade scale at this time. If you have thoughts and ideas, write those down. When we're not in a pandemic and not dealing with what we're dealing with, we can address those concerns and issues and look at the grade scale and possibly consider some changes and updates at that time. We have two grade scales, but as you see, they are identical. The one over here is the one parents see on our website, and the one over here is the one that we look at internally that has the percentage breakdown as well. Now, when we go to Skyward, there are a number of ways you can configure your gradebook. So I have an experimental gradebook here with a student with a few random scores for assignments and assessments. I just noticed I got one assignment at 300 points. Let me fix that quick. Okay. Now, we've got two things we're looking at when it comes to how a grade is calculated or figured in Skyward. The first is the grade scale, and we can find that under grade marks. And then we can look at the default grade marks. Click this triangle here, and you can see there is the grade scale that is being used to figure and calculate the grade of the student. So anyone that has between 87.5 and 100 will get an A. Now, keep in mind, since we're on standards reference grading, I am the one, you are the one who is determining what a 3 is and looks like in your class and what a student has to do to get a 3. So, percents don't matter nearly as much. If a kid did what you asked to earn a 3, they get a 3. If a 3 is an A-, it's an A-. It could be any percent from 87.5 or 75 in our case to 40. I could set that 3 to be any percentage. So the percents do not matter nearly as much as our rubrics and other things. With that being said, I want to look at the second thing we've got going. So our default grade marks do match our scale that is right here when we're looking at the percents in this column. The other thing is categories and weighting, and they're found under categories, and it's right over here, change score method. Now, as a teacher, I can use total points to calculate grades. I can do one term at a time with categories, or I can set up the bottom option here, sets up categories for the entire year. These two are identical, the middle and the bottom. It's just a time frame thing. But the top one is unique. I want to go back for a second, and I want you to look at this grade we've already got working. We see we've got 75.79%. That's an A-. I want to change the category from weighted categories to all points. Everything's of equal worth. Nothing more, nothing less. You can see my screen's changed to reflect that change. And now look, the grade has dropped. That's because this low score is now worth just as much as these two high scores in the green. So for some classes, if all you're doing is projects, for example, and every project has equal worth and value, this is a great way to do it. It's going to add up all the points. It's going to figure out the total percentage of all the points earned. Boom, there's your grade. Now, I'm going to put this back to categories real quick. And just like that. And then we have to modify our categories. We've got to put our percents back in because it erases them when I do this. And this is pretty familiar to anybody who has set up a Skyward gradebook and you've set up your categories. You would then set them up for terms 2, 3, and 4. I will do that later. What I want to show you is the other grade mark option. It still works with the same scale we've already looked at, but it is what we call the variable scale. Now, before we look at that, I want to get into the pros of the percentage-based scale. The biggest pro is the student's grade is calculated using the actual values they have earned. So if you put in a 1.75, the student's grade is calculated using a 1.75. With the variable scale, it will round, as we shall soon see, and round pretty horribly in my opinion. Okay, the downside of the percentage-based scale is it shows a percent of points earned to the parent, to the student, and as we've seen, that can lead parent and student to being more concerned about the letter grade and the percentage of points earned than the actual scores on the assignments. And there's ways we can address that with just communicating to parents, communicating to students, but it is a definite con. Let's take a look at the variable scale. Okay, first, this is what you need to pay attention to right here, is the variable scale still uses a percent, but it's hiding. It's going to be in the background. The variable scale will not show a percentage to parents, but it's still using percentages to figure the grade. For example, anything that has a score, which would be a percentage between 87.5 and 100, is going to get rounded to a 4. So if you put in a 3.5, it's rounding to a 4. Anything between these 2% would be a 3. Anything between these 2% is a 2, a 1, and a 0. So let's see this in action. Now, there's one other thing I have to configure really quick to make this work properly. So just bear with me for a second. I believe that was 2.7. It is. I've done this so much I've got these memorized. Okay, those are the same SRG breakdown as we have right here. So I have not changed anything, I have not modified or deviated anything, and I'm going to click Save. What is it doing? I had it deactivated. Go figure. Now that it's activated, let's try that again. No second takes around here. I don't have the battery for it. Okay, we'll just do a quick double check here. Alright, we're good now. And now it says it's valid because I have the right marks. This down here, by the way, I am not sure what scale this is. I have some suspicions on what it might be, but I'm keeping those to myself. So, right, back to this. So now that I've reconfigured my grade book, you can see the grade changed. It's no longer an A-, it's a B+. Remember, we switched back to categories, weighted categories. If this system was the same as the other, the grade and the percent should be the same, but they're not. And this proves my point that these are rounding. And the way we can tell it's rounded, there's two ways. You can open up the assignment itself, and what you'll see is I put in a 3.5. That's that percentage of the points earned. Because what it's doing, it's taking 3.5 divided by 4 times 100. There's your percent. So it's rounding that up to a 4. If I look at 1.5, you'll see it's rounding down to a 1. In fact, every score value I have tried will round down, except for 3.5. So let's look at 2.75. It rounded down to a 2. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm a student and I earn a 2.75 and the computer gives me a 2 and rounds down, I'm going to be a little bit irked. And rightfully so. I worked hard to get my 2.75 that the teacher gave me based on their rubric or based on however they figured out that 2.75. It gets even more crazy when you change to all points instead of weighted categories. So let's take a look at that. I'm just going to switch here quickly to points. And now, because we're working with not a percent but an average, 2.75, I can do the math quickly. 3.5 and 1.5, that should be 5. There's 8.5, 10, so that'd be 11 and a quarter out of 16, right? So if I take 11 and a quarter, divide it by 4, let me do the math here. 11.25 divided by 4, I should have an average of 2.8125, but I don't. I have an average of 2.75. That is because of the values that were rounded down and up. So 3.5 is actually 4. That's actually 1. That's actually 4. So now I have 4, 5, 9. That rounded down to 2, 10, 11. If I take 11 divided by 4, I get 2.75. This system will work perfectly if all you're putting in is a 1, 2, 3, or 4. It won't round at all because those are the whole number values, and it'll work perfectly. The biggest pro for this system is it does not display a percentage to parents or students. It presents just the scores. So if I open up our test subject here, our test student, who I can give permission to look at her stuff here. If I open up her science class here, you can see B 2.75 out of 4, and then there's the individual scores. No percentage, no nothing. I love that, but I hate the rounding. What you need to decide as an individual teacher is the rounding stopping for you? Is the rounding a red flag for you, where I can't do this to my students? Now, if you're grading everything on a rubric and you don't have half points, this is an ideal way to go. Again, it still uses the exact same grade scale. We're not changing grade scales at all. We're just changing how the grade is calculated and configured. So let me go back here. Oops. And that's pretty much it. You need to decide as a teacher what system you want to use. Do you want to use the variable scale that rounds, so any score that has a percent in between these two numbers is going to get a 4, etc.? Or do you want to use the percentage based? They all have pros and cons. There is no way to do there's no system where you can give this kid the points they've earned and have it not show a percentage. That doesn't work. So we've got to decide as a team, as a faculty, or as individual departments what it is we want to do. Do we want to have it round, up, down, and have that negatively impact our students? Possibly. Or are we going to figure out rubrics so that's not a possibility? Thank you all for taking your time to watch this. If you have any further questions, let me know.